All right, today we're going to cover A/B testing, and A/B testing is really just super simple. It is testing one version of something versus another and to see which one is more effective and breaking it down on exactly what was changed and having that to be a nice clean way of telling what is successful or not. And what we can do for this list of things that you would totally have come up in a real job or things like that is come up with a framework to do that. So instead of your opinion versus my opinion or your manager's opinion versus your own, this gives your team a way to sort that out and find out what you think will be most impactful to the site and do that in a way that's repeatable and helps prevent you from getting scrambled and doing things last minute or getting oh, I got a dog saying hello. um, yeah, so just because your CEO has an idea that he came up with over a holiday doesn't necessarily mean you'll test it. So when they come to you and say, "Hey, would you be willing to test this week?" You can say, "Great, I'll bring that to the meeting. This is the framework we use, and we'll see how it lands and if that is most impactful to the site." So in the long run, they'll be thankful for that. It may cause a little bit of friction early on, but if you can get everyone on the same page with that sort of framework, you will have a lot smoother sailing in the long run and a lot more enjoyable job. So one framework that I like to use is the PXL framework, which we'll get into, but there are a lot of other more simple ones like Pi and ICE you'll see around, but there's a number of problems with that. This awesome article on CXL covers. Highly recommend you check this article out up here at CXL. Great people doing a lot of awesome work there, but what the more sophisticated frameworks do is they break it down by a number of attributes of that thing you want to test, whatever that is, whether it's making the button purple or anything like that. Is it above the fold? Is it that top part of the page before you begin to scroll? Is it noticeable within a few seconds? Did you discover it from user feedback like a survey or some sort of observation? So it gives it a ranking and a priority score based on all of those attributes. And then you have something you can sort out based on the values that you have and your ability to develop that with the number of development resources that are available. So definitely check out all of these, but we're going to hop in Tableau because we already have data from one of those setups of the test. So we have a unique ID for a test, just like you would have a unique ID for anything. It's easier to work with when you're using data to have something unique for that. So not just the name of it, but some sort of simple ID like you have for a social security number or student ID. Each one of these has a test ID, and then it has some attributes like we talked about. Is it above the fold and all of that? So all of those attributes are there, and then we can graph them and see if there are some areas we can focus on. So just very briefly, we can look at this. Let's see if we can find a graph here. So I just pulled in test description. So that was what the actual thing that has changed. So here it's like put the search bar up at the top of the page instead of in the center. So that's one thing someone suggested that they could possibly test. So instead of just having a table of priority and dev score and things like that, this has that list where it compares the effort to develop with the priority. So that priority is a score based on all those things that I mentioned and more. You can see some others. Is it on a high traffic page? Does it increase motivation? Stuff like that. And so that impact is the star and that dev effort is the bar. And so if there's a high dev effort and a low impact, we can just dismiss that out of hand. So there'd be a lot of effort and not a lot of impact. But if there's a high impact and a low dev effort, let's see if we can sort this. So these are things with low dev effort. So if you have a high impact comparatively and a low dev effort, that's probably something that you should definitely do. Those are like the low-hanging fruit of what to choose. And if there's something that's important to do that has high dev effort, but also high impact, but it's important for another reason, like you're focusing on what's on the top of the page, or you're focusing on things from user feedback, then maybe that is what you would do. So you probably have, one or two developers, and they have a certain number of hours they can work on this. So it's important to be efficient with those resources and get the things that are most likely to have an impact in there. So what you can do is use this to analyze to figure out that difference between the dev effort and priority score, but also bring in your other values. And so, for example, maybe you were addressing issues from user feedback. You can drop that onto filters and go to next, and you can choose. So right now it's a 0 or 1. So 1 in this case is true and 0 is false. So is it addressing an issue from qualitative feedback like surveys? So we can put that to 1 and click OK. So now this is only looking at those tests that are addressing users, addressing an issue from user feedback. And so those that have a high priority and a low dev effort might be what you want to select. So whatever it is you select, you have your values and your focuses, but it's making it a choice with intention and describing why you made that way. So that gives us a good analysis there. And so once we do that to choose what we want to choose, so say I was really focused on this user survey actions, and I wanted to pick those with low dev effort and high there. So for whatever reason, I'm going to choose the ones that made sense for those values. And I'm going to pick 3 here. This one's a little bit more dev effort, but maybe, actually, let's not do that one. Let's do the one that has higher impact. That makes a lot more sense. So I'm clicking Control or maybe Command on a Mac and right-clicking and clicking Group with the paperclip. And so now we have a new group, and I'm going to rename that group here. I'm going to call that Selected Tests so we can differentiate that. Since we have such a large list, I actually already have something called it. So let's just call this Selected Tests to Develop, which is really long-winded, but why the heck not? So, all right. So right now it's actually colored already based on that group. So that's how, if you don't have that already, you would take that group and drop it into color if you want it for all, or just the individual. If you only wanted the dev effort bars to be blue, you could choose that. That's how the color tab works. So now that we have it as a group, you can actually use that here, and you can use it to organize. So now you have both that and the description, which is kind of nice. So maybe we're talking about all the tests and you want them all on the screen here, and then you can duplicate this, and maybe you want a version where you're only showing the ones that are selected. So you can right click on other and exclude. That's a possibility. You can also duplicate this. Kind of bug attacking me. You can also do this and take out the description. So now you know what this looks like for each type of the graph. But we have a problem here. If you'll notice that, we can make this a little bigger here. And so that is the sum of the dev efforts. So that's kind of influenced by the number of all the tests that are in those categories. So that sum will be massive for others. We actually need to change that to be differently aggregated. So this should be an average instead of a sum, because you want to understand the average of that set a lot better than just adding them all up. So if you had 1,000,000 tests under other, it would add up the 1,000,000, and that does not help us describe what's different about each of those categories. All right, so now you've got an easy comparison. So now you can see that like the average priority score and the dev effort, let's see, is that on a dual? We'll undo the dual axis. So now you can see the average priority score is higher for the group that we have, and the dev effort is higher for the other. So that shows that difference that we were talking about. We do have one issue here. So in the groups, so on that paperclip group name, you can click that, click edit group, and it automatically makes this name that's a combination of everything. It looks terrible. Just go ahead and rename that to tests to develop, or whatever naming works best for you. I'm just giving you examples, and notice that other is there. If you don't have other as an option, you can click that. So now they're just all there and they're not in a group. This include other makes this extra group that anything that comes in there goes in that group. And that happens if you even bring in new data or anything else, it'll just pop it into that other category. It's a super neat little thing, especially as your data changes and grows, and you don't even have to do anything if you have that other group set up. It'll just flow into there. If it's not selected, it'll pop right there. Awesome. Well, that is basically what we were looking at with this part one of how do you look at the different attributes of a test and prioritize that so that way your team is smoother running and you have a reason for it. You're not just like, I pick these randomly, or you have some sort of superficial reason, like these have the most priority. It's like, but do you have enough resources to be able to develop them? And how did you choose between the ones that were there? This gives you a structure and format to do that. So next up is actually running the tests. So now that your team decided to do that, they ran the tests, we will actually look at testing results. And so one thing to think about too is you get really stuck in the data and test 1 and 2 and 3 and versions A and B. So one of the big mistakes that people do when they're looking at these data is they combine the different tests together. So this is like a huge mistake. It makes no sense. So you're like, oh yeah, well, the A version did this. It's like the A version of which test. So if you're testing which oranges taste better and which apples taste better, the version A orange, the blood orange, and the version A apple, the Gala apple, or the cosmic apple actually is a new one. That can't be combined. You're wanting to compare like Granny Smith versus Cosmic, and you want to compare Blood Orange versus Navel Orange. So it makes absolutely no sense to say, overall, the A version did this. It helps no one. It tells you nothing. It's just completely unrelated. You may as well combine. You did great in calculus and you did great in art history. It's like that doesn't tell us like what another student versus you did within that class. So make sure you're keeping grounded in what it actually tells you, and so you actually have to use the test number here and to see how it did there. Now another thing you could do is like see how it did, over time. And I'm going to put this on to test 1. So when I'm doing a time series, I really only want to look at one test at a time in this example. And I'm going to do an exact date. See, let's go just to conversion rate A, conversion rate B. And I'm on daily values, so it's okay, but some is probably not what I want to look at in case anything changes and I want to look at it by a week or a month or something like that. I don't want to double count it. But this is what we want to look at. So this is A versus B, but the key is that test 1 is selected here. If I had them all together, that really doesn't tell me anything. I want to look at these separately. And so now I can see the conversion rate over time. Now, something might tell us on the drop there that maybe there was something outside of the test that occurred, like maybe the iPhone was launched, and so the Android phone sales went down that week, or vice versa. But what we really look at to determine whether it's successful or not is the overall um, conversions and conversion rates. So the number of sales, for example, might have been very small for this test, and that small amount isn't really enough to tell us whether it's successful or not just on that day. So the by date is really helping us uncover things other than the overall success of the program. For the overall success, what we want to do is figure out the numbers from here overall for the test. And what we can do is use a calculator. So this one from Online Dialogue is really cool. There's some web versions as well that do statistical significance calculations. This one's pretty fun. You can bring it up in Excel and it does all the work for you. So if you go to that site and click enable editing, it gives you this easy way of just inputting the number of users for each variation of the A/B testing, which conversions happened, and does all the mathy stuff for you. So we're not super mathy on this channel. What we want to do is figure out after typing these things in the light green in, how many users do you have? And we can figure that out from those graphs and the tables. Just bring in the total numbers, and it tells you the conversion rate. In this case, it's automatically calculating everything in the white, and then it'll tell you with these colors if the A version is the default is what we're counting it as, and so B has 43.4% more conversion. It gives you that confidence interval here, which we set to a 90%. You can choose 95% confidence interval, and you'll get little wider bands there. But the green tells us it was significantly better for this B version. So that means the number of conversions at 141 is so much higher than 119 for this number of users that we're statistically confident that if we adopted the B version for the site, that it would in fact be more successful than the A version. So it's important to get that sort of language to describe what you're seeing and be able to make the most impact for your site. But that is about it. So good luck with your tests and creating an environment and a team that can A/B test successfully, and then be able to determine which actually won and adopt those for your site, and you will do great.